Littleton has a rich agricultural history dating back to the farms and homesteads that first made up the area along the South Platte River in the 1860s. Farming crops and growing plants in our area has always been a difficult task given the temperate climate and less than ideal soil. But that doesn't stop residents from growing some of the most beautiful gardens in Colorado and the country. We want to take some time to introduce you to 4 of Littleton's best urban gardeners and let them share the tips and tricks that help them grow the gorgeous gardens of Littleton.
Well, I accidentally started gardening when I lived up in the mountains. I lived at 8,500 feet, and I was super inspired by the Vale the Betty Ford Gardens in Vale. And so I started just potting we had 40 acres of rocks and mountain. I started excavating rocks and throwing in some perennials. And eventually I just created this enormous garden. Unfortunately, my husband got his dream job, so we moved down to Denver, unfortunately for the garden. But fortunately, I started up a new garden. And originally, I had a lot of high altitude sort of ideas that I tried to superimpose into the lower altitude Denver climate, and very different animal. So I've had to rip out a lot of plants that got really crazy leggy and too big, or just didn't work here. And so it's been a huge learning curve for me. When we first moved here, this was just all dirt, except the trees. And so I spent quite a lot of time looking at it and contemplating, and then I did a few drawings of what I would really like in a garden. And I love gravel pathway. I love how you can meander and have a little journey. And I love having each bed separate, so it's its own little ecosystem on each bed. And each bed has a different vibe slightly and different quirks. I mean, the soil is the same, but it's not the same. Some things might thrive in one bed and not in the other, so I'm constantly changing beds. But the whole pathway, I wanted something that was cohesive and connected, and that would just separate out each section of the garden. And I find that being a lone gardener really manageable. So I can just say, I'm going to deal with that bed today, and piece it out like that. Despite the Japanese beetle, I love roses. I've hung in there with my roses. I spray and pick beetles off. I don't really like traps. And then some things from the mountain have worked, like yarrow, phlox, dianthus, sedums grow really well here. Here is my edible area. I've harvested most of the produce. Actually, I was just fiddling around here and grabbed some purple potatoes and some Yukon just popped out. But actually now I tend to just grow things I'm actually really legitimately going to eat. I think a lot of people grow a ton of stuff and can't get rid of it, like million zucchinis. So I don't bother now. We eat a lot of potatoes and onion. I eat a ridiculous amount of onions. I love onions, I have terrible breath. I guess I look at it kind of like yoga. It's a practice. And it's constantly evolving and changing, and there's always little challenges and there's little victories, but it's like life, you know, it's up and down. There's no closure. It's just ongoing. So I really like that. You know, each year is a different year. There's a different seasonal challenges. You know, we had a lot of rain, then dry, rain. So yeah, it's the practice, and it humbles me. You know, you can never quite master it. just keeps you on your toes as a human, and I like that. Keeps me modest and grounded.
I like to say my grandmother introduced me to planting a zucchini, a little seed, when I was 5 years old in Park Hill, where we used to live. And that just captivated me. I couldn't believe it. It was hard for me not to go out and dig the seed up every day to see what progression it had made. But from that point, I just loved it. And even when I was in my training years and everything, I just, if I couldn't grow a garden, it just, summer wasn't summer. This is my favorite area, right here. And I have my potting bench, and I got running water so I can clean everything up and take it inside and have it ready to go. It's just a nice place. There's 3 ways you can water a plant. You can take the hose and you can spray the foliage, which is the worst way. The way that a lot of people do is they'll take the hose and they'll put it right here at the soil level, and that works fine. You just have to soak it and stay there for a while, but you get some erosions. But the best way to do it is to take and put the water down at the bottom and let the plant put its roots down there. And this is with a net cup, you can see. And so that planter, or that plant itself, wicks up the water, and it puts its roots right down and does the same thing. And these are the same design here for tomatoes. There's an orange cayenne. I was always the vegetable guy for our family when we grew up, and then branched out into flowers. These are our main flower beds here. We devote a lot of this to perennials, but then we have a few areas that we bring in our annuals to get that bright color. In this area here with a little more shade, we can put in sun patience. We've got different kinds of coleus. Our begonias this year were okay, not great, but you know, some years you get great begonias and some you don't. One of the keys, another key to growing in Colorado, is water management. You know, everybody gets busy. You have other things in your life. I'm working full time, and you know, I'm not here, or we go on vacation in the summer. And you've gotta, in my opinion, if you want your flowers to look good and you don't want to inconvenience everybody by making them come over and water, we put out 25 pots this year. Now 25, that's a lot of pots. That's a lot of independent watering. And for somebody to come over here in the heat of July, when we were gone on our vacation, and to water those 25 pots maybe twice a day, it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of moving water cans around. So all of our pots, with the exception of a few, are all dripped. They all have their own independent source of water. And I set it up in the very beginning. It's a little bit of work on the front end, but every time I do one, I say, okay, for the rest of the season, I'm not going to have to water this pot anymore. And it just takes care of it. These elephant ears all have their own soaker hose and drip line. The drip line comes up. It can be shut down if I need to. But everything over here, even these, if you look here, there's a drip line that has been attached to the pergola and comes to our hanging pots and allows us to water all this. You know, I think what's key is soil preparation. Getting really good soil and putting plenty of biodegradable, I mean, whether it's peat moss or compost or whatever, but getting that in and working it into the soil. Colorado clay has got a lot of elements to it. It's good for growing, but it's also very compact and tight. We don't, on the hill here, it's mostly clay. We have very little sand. So I think that's the most important thing from the beginning, is really getting your soil right. As far as plants are concerned, some are famous. They do really well here because you have to plant on dry heat as your default. And some of them I cannot grow despite everything. I mean, I cannot grow a hosta to save my life.
My background is as a photographer and a musician. So I build a lot of art and music and just silly things. And so it's important to me as a photographer, I like to have different areas of focus. So as a result, we have like the zombie flower bed and the coffin, and we have over on the other side, we have a life-size rocking horse, and let's see, there's the music room over here and a bathtub, and there's just little bits. Of course, the gazebo is kind of the jewel of the garden, so it's hard to miss. And so yeah, we spend a lot of time out here with coffee and other things. If it's interesting, it comes out to the yard unless it's, you know, still functional, and then it goes inside till it's not. This garden it sort of has a personality, and it's a very old garden. The house was built, depending on which records you believe, either 1915 or 1936. So the garden is really old, and it has like a ginkgo tree that's pretty unusual. It's got a maple tree of a variety that we can't identify, a golden chain tree. It's got a lot of unusual things that aren't really supposed to grow or do well here. It's kind of hard, you know. I feel like the garden is so happy to have some attention that it rewards us with just strange things that we have to go find a botanist to identify. But I mean, it likes anything wild grows really well here. There's roses all over the place. There's sunflowers and, you know, various wild geraniums that come up. It just kind of depends. I feel like anything that you put in the ground, you just have to be prepared for it to get about 3 times the size it is supposed to get, because it's magic soil. I like the looks on people's faces when they walk past the coffin and go, "Oh my God." And I already had the skeleton, so it worked out really great, you know. There's no place to get rid of a piano these days. Like, people are giving them away, they're free, you can't do anything with it. So he's like, "Well, I guess I'll just take it to the dump." I said, "No, thank you, we'll bring it out here." So we set it out here, and it sort of faded into an ugly color, so I painted it. And that's our garden piano. And I thought, if we're gonna have a garden piano, we should have a whole music room. And that's the gnome house that is the cupola that used to be up on top of the old garage. So now it sits there as a centerpiece and sort of a, you know, a garden gnome shelter, you know, sort of a collecting place for all the garden gnomes when we're not looking. I tend to buy the things that fill in really well, and then I splurge on weird things and hope that they grow. But, you know, the great thing for me about this garden is that I have no idea what I'm doing, and I know that I have no idea what I'm doing. So I can't really fail because I don't know what I'm doing. So, you know, if it works, then it's really cool, and if not, then I've learned something, so, you know.
We've been for about 2 years, and we started working on the garden as soon as we moved in, because this is pretty much the reason why we bought this house, because it was completely blank slate. There was nothing here except a pile of weeds and some dirt. So we're in love with the house because of that. We could just make it our own, and we started working on it right away. We got kind of the bare bones put in within a few months, and then we've just been adding on to it ever since. We grow a ton of stuff. Our favorite thing to grow is probably the chilies, which we've got over here. So we grow a lot of chilies. I'm growing okra this year, which we've had a lot of. I grow eggplants, we're trying asparagus. We grow tomatoes, we grow cucumbers, lots of herbs. And this year we kind of just did one flower bed, so kind of a little bit of everything every year. So this is our first year having the big long garden bed. Eventually we're gonna fill it with perennials, but this year I just put wildflower seeds in there and just a few sweet potato vines and just kind of let it go crazy, and I kind of like the look that I got this year, but again, this will be an experiment every year too, just to see what looks good. In this area back here, we grow different things every year. And the first 2 years that we were here, we grew pumpkins because it's such a big space that we just put a bunch of pumpkin plants back there. And last year we had about 50 pumpkins that we grew in that spot. And in order to kind of honor my grandpa and what I learned from him about gardening, we had a pumpkin sale in our front yard, and we donated all the proceeds to the Alzheimer's Foundation. So that was really fun. It was super fun. This year we decided to try corn and sunflowers instead, so we'll probably do pumpkins again in the future. My sister hates sunflowers and my husband hates them too, actually, but I love sunflowers, I think because they're creepy. So this year we decided to grow some really tall ones, and they are not disappointing. They are super creepy and weird, which is exactly what I wanted from them, so. We had my dad and some of his friends help us dig out this huge hole for the pond. And that was like one of the first things we put in. We built it all of ourselves. We just had somebody help dig it, and then we kind of did the rest our own. Then we bought a bunch of fish, put them in there, and they've been doing great. Pretty much every night in the summer, we like to sit here and just watch the fish and just drink a beer and relax. And we also have some frogs. Obviously they're hiding right now, but we've got frogs that come out at night, and they love living in this pond too, so it's a fun place for animals. I would say anybody who wants to start a garden, start with plants that are native or made for this climate. Like, I think a lot of people buy plants at garden stores that even though they sell them here in Colorado, you really probably shouldn't grow them here. So we've learned that kind of the hard way. We bought a lot of plants that were like, oh, this looks beautiful, but it's not really meant for Colorado. So I would say do your research and find out what plants work well here, and then just work kind of with the natural plants.